To sail the waves, paddle in its tide pools, or smuggle by moonlight is all to step foot within Umberlee's domain. Umberlee is the goddess of the sea and all of the terrors it holds. Its wrathful storms, towering waves, the uncanny stillness that belies the treacherous depths of its trenches, the beasts that undulate below the surface, and the civilizations who dwell on the sea floor. Umberlee is a chaotic, evil-aligned deity. She is mercurial, vengeful, and greedy, and commands respect and fear from those who worship her, whether they choose to or are pressured into supplication through their profession or abode. I used to think of Umberlee as being evil in the same way wildfires, tornadoes, or earthquakes could be considered evil, in that they're all unbridled forces of nature that often cause destruction. But Umberlee goes further than this. She does choose where to bestow her favours. She is sometimes convinced to be merciful via opulent offerings, and she will get vicious revenge on anyone who thinks they can circumnavigate her influence. More often than not, to sail into her oceans is to resign yourself to some kind of sacrifice, whether that's of your cargo, your sailors, or even occasionally, if she's especially pissed off at you, your ship. So yeah, Umberlee is evil, but I respect her for it. As goddess of the sea, Umberlee has total control over a realm that most people in Faerun are forced to interact with, whether that's via trade, fishing, or travel. Umberlee is simply a fact in voyaging into the sea, and she does not tolerate those who ignore her power, no matter if they're a towering galleon or a tiny fishing boat. Despite being an evil deity, Clergy of Umberlee are beholden to save anglers and sailors if disaster strikes, taking priority over ships in Umberlee's harbours. I believe this is at least partially out of self-interest. These people will then redouble their offerings to Umberlee in thanks of being saved, and need to remain alive in the first place in order to bring Umberlee even more treasures for her vault. If ships and cargo are destroyed in these disasters, war or otherwise, the sailors, anglers, and merchants will have to work twice as hard to replace lost cargo, which means more sea voyages, more ships built, and therefore more tribute to Umberlee. Of course, Umberlee can depend upon her waveservants to avenge their goddess. The Wave Mother's robe describes the tale of a most wondrous fish, scales resplendent, an intricate jewel that shone beneath the sea. When it died, the Wave Mother gifted its hide as a robe to her most devoted follower, and demanded that she drown the sailors that killed her gem-bright fish. As the Wave Mother's robe indicates, while Umberlee does directly revenge herself upon the heads of those who are foolish enough to sail her seas without begging for her mercy first, her wave servants can be depended upon to torment those who have slighted the Bitch Queen, whether Umberlee commands it or not. Baldur's Gate is bordered to the west by the Sea of Swords. To not have a temple dedicated to the Bitch Queen, the Queen of the Depths, the Wave Mother, the Storm Goddess of the Seas, the Sea Bitch, is fragrantly inviting her wrath upon the city. Fisherfolk, sailors, smugglers, merchants, loved ones of those lost at sea, patriars who own docks walled in by her waves, anyone who lives in a coastal town like Baldur's Gate, all pray to Umberlee. Hence it should come as no surprise that the Water Queen's house is the oldest temple in Baldur's Gate, expanded and garnished upon over the centuries. Pirates and smugglers were among the first worshippers of Umberlee in Baldur's Gate, knowing all too well the role she would play in the success of the burgeoning town before it even dreamt of becoming a city. As Baldur's Gate blossomed into a city, Umberlee's temple was only tolerated because of the open spirit of the people of Baldur's Gate, according to the 1993 edition of the Forgotten Realms campaign setting tome. However, denying the influence of Umberlee in a port city feels like lunacy to me, so I would argue that a healthy sense of self-preservation played a part too. Having read in depth about Umberlee, I would not pull it past her to wipe a city off of the map if it stopped giving its considerable tribute to her. Over the centuries, Baldurans would come to see Umberlee as a mother, not a benevolent one by any means, but a matriarch who sustained her children through permitting them to trade, smuggle, and fish. In 1358 DR, about 134 years before the events of Baldur's Gate 3, the Water Queen's house was helmed by Storm Priestess Jelantha Mistmere, who led 8 priestesses and 16 followers. By the time of Baldur's Gate 3, the Water Queen's house is led by flood-tide Elandra Grey, as her mother and grandmother did before her. Flood-tide Elandra Grey was chosen directly by Umberlee to lead her faithful, when, as a young girl, Elandra wished upon the heavens. Elandra's Whelm is a trident cut from Baldur's Gate 3, which was presumably wielded by Elandra, and the description reads, "When Elandra was a girl, she saw a hot spool of matter fire through the sky. She wished upon this falling star, but, instead of getting an answer from the sky, she got one from the sea in the voice of Umberlee, goddess of the endless fathom." Umberlee heard Elandra praying to the heavens and saw fit to remind her where her mother's and grandmother's loyalty lay, and Elandra heeded the call, or warning, probably a bit of both. This is slightly unusual for the Water Queen's house. Usually it's served by women who have been widowed by the sea or young girls orphaned by the sea. To have 3 generations of grey women lead the temple, to me, indicates the fervour that the grey women devoted to Umberlee. Floodtide had become a title inherited, passed from mother to daughter and accompanied by the ferocity of Umberlee's devoted throughout so many bloodlines. Baldur's Gate 3 seems to imply that different responsibilities denote different titles among Umberlee's acolytes. Floodtide for the head priestess, Darkbreaker for fighters, Untaken for novice acolytes, and Seawind for the remaining clergy. Yet, according to Faiths and Avatars, these titles, in addition to Puissant Undertow, Wave of Fury, Wave Mistress, and Savage Seawind, can be adopted by any acolyte once they've graduated from a novice Untaken. Umberlants who have esteemed themselves in Umberlee's name can add the word Dread before their title, though it does look like this naming convention has been replaced by the time of Baldur's Gate 3. The Wave Queen's house is served by, along with Elandra Grey, Flan Hawser, Mickey Corey, Dio Mera Trellis, Fitzy Relma, O'Hara O'Hara, Tinsy Rapp, and Star Stellotti. These waveservants have surnames, in contrast to others like Alonia, Jira, or Vilmina, who only have first names. I think that the waveservants with surnames are widows, and those without are orphans who were ridded of their kin name to signify that they had been adopted by Umberlee. Widowed waveservants choose to serve Umberlee, and through worshipping the Bitch Queen, which yes, is a real and accepted name for her, even among her faithful, they believe that they are brought closer to their lost family. Being in the water might bring widows or orphans a sense of peace by being closer to the final resting place of their family members. A certain side of the Water Queen's house was not shown in Baldur's Gate 3. It has been known for some worshippers that layfolk have descended down the temple steps, which lead into Grey Harbour's waves, to join their loved ones. Permanently, if you catch my drift, pun not intended. Elandra Grey doesn't promote this ritual, but she doesn't prevent it either. As Umberlee welcomes sacrifice in her name, she would likely resent Elandra should she prevent willing souls from giving themselves to the Wave Mother. Elandra is used to death too. Death itself is a very familiar concept for waveservants. The initiation to become a devotee of Umberlee is brutal and requires the supplicant to come close to death themselves. Upon pledging themselves to Umberlee, worshippers have to undergo the drowning. Doesn't take much imagination to think what that could comprise of. They lie upon an altar in a tide cavern, and a priestess summons seawater, which crashes through the cave before flowing away. Novices who survive the onslaught are christened Untaken. The priestess can water breathe, so they're really at no risk, and they're told that Umberlee spared them during the drowning. Should they ever betray the Wave Mother, they will suffer the drowning they were once spared from. Indeed, acolytes who have betrayed the Wave Mother or displeased her in some way die in their sleep from drowning on dry land, their lungs inexplicably filled with seawater. Latent threats of drowning keep the less faithful wave servants in Umberlee's service, so when she demands action, all wave servants jump to obey, knowing what awaits them if they refuse. They bless sailors and fisherfolk and all else who come, and also identify relics dredged up from the sea floor. Should Umberlee desire the return of one relic in particular, she sends her acolytes to seize the item and return it to her embrace at once. Drowning is the unspoken threat beneath every request that Umberlee sends. Tav's time in the Water Queen's house takes place at low tide, and this sounds mundane, but it is important to consider. The stairs at the rear of the Water Queen's house are exposed, the small beach below occupied by some fisherfolk. Low tide reveals the entrance to the cave below the temple and the vault it contains. These steps would be underwater at high tide, the cave hidden from sight. Down these steps, Umberlants descend to bring the temple's offerings to Umberlee, returning later with empty hands. Buldurans think it's bad luck to look in the sea when waveservants take offerings under the waves, although they suspect that Umberlee herself comes to claim the spoils of her temple and leaves her waveservants empty-handed. To look into the sea when this offering is being deposited is to potentially catch a glimpse of Umberlee, and that's not something that she wants unless she wills it herself. Buldurans are partly right. Below the Water Queen's house, as Tav can find out, is a sunken cave with ancient stonework, amongst the oldest in the entire city. I personally think these are leftovers from the Undercity, but there's nothing canon to confirm this. Although if you would like a video on the Undercity, please do let me know because it is on my list. Umberlee does not personally claim her offerings, she's far too powerful for that. Although she is one of the few gods in Baldur's Gate 3 that directly communicates to Tav, along with Ball, Shar and Withers, mind you, but that's only if Tav steals from her.
You dare steal from the very sea that birthed you? Enjoy these breaths. They shall be your last.
I mean, she has her priorities straight, I'll give her that. Unknown to anyone but her most faithful, these offerings are deposited in a special vault that opens on one side to a water-filled tunnel which leads back into the sea. Every hour, a group of Sahuagin emerge from the pools, led by a Sahuagin priestess, and take the offerings back to the Sea of Swords to present them to the Bitch Queen. Offerings are deposited in the vault each day. Untaken Fitzurelma tells Tav that she has to deposit the contents of the offering chest in the vault before the next tide, the subtext here being that she has to do so the Sahuagin can swim in with the next tide. Perhaps you remember Sahuagin from their role in patrolling the Iron Throne, or from their ambush on the seafront near Mystic Carrion's mansion. Sahuagin are ferocious sea-dwelling creatures with their own civilization beneath the waves, and utter contempt for land dwellers. Although some of them worship a shark god named Sekala, other Sahuagin are in the service of Umberlee and act as her underwater contingent of faithful. In exchange for the offerings from the Water Queen's temple, Sahuagin refrain from attacking Baldur's Gate, its harbour, or any ships in its vicinity. I am unsure if Sahuagin take some kind of payment from the offerings deposited by the waveservants, or if this involvement in worshipping Umberlee is seen as payment enough by the Sahuagin, and all the offerings that they collect go directly to the Wave Mother herself. In fact, almost all Sahuagin have valuables upon themselves which you can loot if you end up killing them. Now, these are either their own valuables that they found on the seafloor, or they are the remains of the offerings left by the waveservants and taken from the vault. Either way, Sahuagin are in service of the waveservants when they need it, especially when it comes to defence. Sahuagin can be called by waveservants to defend them when the vault is under attack. By you. Occasionally, when a sailor, a ship, or a captain doesn't supplicate to Umberlee enough, according to her Umberlants, the Sahuagin also act as harpies, i.e. tools of vengeance. Waveservants, upon deciding that someone has dishonoured Umberlee, leaves a clam with the offerings in the vault. When the Sahuagin open the clam, it recites a message of up to 25 words in common using a magic mouth spell, which the Sahuagin priestess then translates into their own tongue. These words, sent by flood tide Alandra Grey, indicates the ship that she wants destroyed, so that when the next new moon comes, its crew, captain and cargo will be dragged into the depths, the ship their final coffin. These attacks coming solely around the new moon is pragmatic, it gives plenty of time for the ship to rescind their mistake, and it also acts as an insult to Selûne, because Umberlee hates Selûne. As the goddess of navigation, Selûne provides a foil for those who sail on Umberlee's seas, a potential escape for suffering Umberlee's wrath. Destroying ships when Selûne's moon is at its fullest is a petty middle finger from the Bitch Queen to the Moon Maiden. Non-Umberlants approach the Water Queen's house with trepidation. The Sword Coast couriers outlined that when delivering post to the temple, couriers must have water-breathing potions to hand. As the temple can be approached via the streets, this may indicate something nefarious. Is there a risk that the courier might be drowned by waveservants? that they have to enter the vaults under the temple at high tide and swim underwater, or merely insurance against being thrown into the sea by a furious Elandra? I have no idea, so let me know if you have any theories about this. To her goddess's delight, Elandra is more than willing to get her hands dirty on behalf of her goddess. The flood tide keeps a close eye on the ships going back and forth around Baldur's Gate and as far as the Moonshae Isles. In one of her accounts, the Moonshae Strait Shipping Report, Elandra writes, "I witnessed as the Queen lashed the prow of a vessel called the Kinship with whips of waves and foam until she'd taken her prize. 2 sailors dragged to her salted bosom, upon which she did retreat and left the Kinship to reach its destination in peace. So great was her mercy. It did cross my humble mind that such a vessel, upon its return journey, might take a longer, unfamiliar route to avoid her wrath, and might thus become vulnerable to other kinds of interference." She seals this communique in a chest in her office. No surprise there, because in the report, Elandra speculates that there may be a way for the Water Queen's house to secure the ship's valuables. I did tell you that Umberlee was an evil deity. Fear of Umberlee might push the Kinship into unfamiliar territory, where Elandra could place waveservants or Sahuagin to seize whatever's valuable on the vessel. Remember, I did tell you that Umberlee was an evil deity. Indeed, Umberlee does have an investment in smuggling, illegal trade, and her waveservants sabotaging valuable cargoes when they're at sea, far away from any state authority or God. Smugglers themselves drop coins in the waters of the Grey Harbour to appease Umberlee, especially if they're smuggling living beings who are liable to make more fuss and thus are much higher risk. On the legal but still dodgy side of business, Elandra has set her sights on the Water Queen's house owning as many docks and shipping yards as possible. In the book Creating Acquisitions, she writes that, "By the year's end we'll have sufficient resources to acquire Nerthamus' shipping yard. For years now, the duties paid at docks across the city have been far too low. The temple all but subsidises local trade. This will be rectified once we are able to acquire enough docks to force a rise in tariffs. We may even be able to regild the nave in Waterdeep with the profits." Nerthamus is a patriarch family in Baldur's Gate who supply ships for long voyages. Patriarchs are the wealthy elite of the city, with their fingers in the saccharine sweet pies of trade, politics and law, among many other spheres. Securing a monopoly on docks would allow the Water Queen's house to raise tariffs tenfold without sending prospective ships to other docks, because every dock under Elandra's control would charge eye-watering tariffs and duties on imported gods, and all of that gold would go right back into the Water Queen's vault. Elandra sees her temple as subsidising local trade, as the fees they charge have to be low enough to remain competitive, increasing the profit margin from any local trade arriving by sea. Umberlee sees none of that profit, so for her high priestesses who are, I will remind you, evil aligned, there is nothing to gain through charity. It makes sense for Umberlee to want to regild the nave, which is the central portion of Umberlee's Waterdeep temple, with the profits, in order to honour the Wave Mother and make sure that gold is being put to good, holy use. Underneath the Water Queen's house, something slightly unsettling is afoot. A Kuatoa is on the table, ready to be feasted upon by the Umberlants. Granted, shark, barracuda and Kuatoa are all sacred foods to followers of Umberlee, as eating them is permitted by the Wave Mother. As the Kuatoa is dead, waiting on the table and ready to be torn apart, I can safely assume that Tav enters the Water Queen's house on a holy day. Either that, or this is to commemorate Holli's funeral, who I will get into in just a bit. Now, I refuse to believe that it's a coincidence that Umberlee should sanction the eating of sharks, and Kuatoa in particular. Kuatoa do not worship Umberlee, no matter what the Forgotten Realms wiki says, as I could not find any source to corroborate that assertion. If you do know of one, please let me know. Sharks are the attack gods of secular loyal Sahuagin, as well as being reminiscent of their shark god Secular. Umberlee encourages her followers to dine on those beings who represent, are used by, or just plain are, heretics in her eyes. An ingenious way to whittle down the local numbers of her enemies, honestly. Just eat them. I'm about halfway through telling you the lore all about Umberlee, so if you're enjoying this video, please do like and subscribe to my little lore channel. I cover video game lore and am mainly focusing on Baldur's Gate 3 at the moment. I also have a Patreon, which for £5 a month you can get early ad-free access to all of my videos, as well as some behind the scenes content and whatnot. If you want to support the channel for free, please feel free to share my videos with any of your friends who play D&D, like D&D, or play Baldur's Gate 3, as that helps me out massively. And now, back to the video. Umberlee does not like her devotees escaping her, but there is a rare example of one succeeding. On the shore of Baldur's Gate, near the Grey Harbour and the Sahuagin attack upon the fisherfolk, is an abandoned home once owned by Winky One-Eye Vonneyin. Yes, their nickname is Winky because they have one eye. Brutal. In 1486, 6 years before the events of Baldur's Gate 3, Winky met a waveservant named Salty. They fell in love, and soon Salty wanted to flee her duties at the Water Queen's house, and Winky wanted to flee Captain Grizzly of the Blushing Mermaid, and together they sought to elope to the Moonshae Isles. Winky was a smuggler. Below their house is a trapped basement which contains Zhentarim and Thayan crates, smuggled into Baldur's Gate through the cove flowing through Vonneyin's house. Atop a shelf in their house there is a fishing rod, so maybe Winky was fronting as a fisherfolk, and that's probably how they met Salty. On top of an old table in Winky's basement hideout is a scrapbook of love letters, salt-stained and with a dozen envelopes glued inside. While they once probably contained plenty of letters between the lovers, by the time Tav finds it, only 2 remain. They read, "Oh Winky, how I long to be away with you on the open seas, away from that grim old flood tide, away where I can love you freely and without fear. With my ability to charm fish from the waves, we'll never lack for food, and you know I never tire of your chowder. The Moonshaes, I'll show them to you, lass, and we'll dance on them silver beaches in the silver moonlight. But I don't want no trouble on our sea journey, so first I'll make my peace with Umberlee with a grand donation. Not much longer, Salty." In an old backpack lying next to the bed is a key to the counting house safe number 6. It contains 2 rucksacks, one containing mundane items like a mug and some rope, and the second with a clue as to Winky and Salty's plan. Inside is a disguise kit and some thieves' tools. Useful for a smuggler, and also for those trying to escape the gaze of flood-tide Alandra and Captain Grizzly. The counting house does lift Safe 6's owner in its records, but they are anonymous, and visited the safe 3 times, but over what time period that is, I don't really know. Winky enlisted the help of a fellow smuggler named Sneggers to help get them and Salty out of Baldur's Gate. Sneggers asked for a begemmed dagger that Winky had in payment, and the night of the 14th of Marpanoth, Winky and Salty fled to the Moonshae Isles. Salty had confided in one other waveservant, or at least an Umberlant regular at the Water Queen's house. Inside Vonneyin's postbox is a note from this anonymous concerned individual. "Dear One-Eye, I don't know who you are, but I know we've a friend in common. A dear friend who I haven't heard from in a while. The last time we spoke, she said she was meeting you, and she hasn't been seen since. I'm not trying to accuse you of anything, but I am worried. If you know anything about her whereabouts, please come and find me. I'll be at the Water Queen's house." The fact that Salty's friend didn't hear from Salty or Winky makes me hope that the lovers made it out of Baldur's Gate safely. This letter was also never taken out of Vonneyin's mailbox, indicating that whatever happened to them, neither Winky nor Salty returned to the house. 2 Darkbreakers also fell in love, and their tale so far seems to be just as happy as that of Winky and Salty. Darkbreaker Noria and Darkbreaker Vilmina fell in love, with Noria writing a special poem to Vilmina commemorating their first date, where Vilmina gave Noria the gift of a conch. Whether this is a euphemism for something that resembles a conch, I'm not sure, but Noria was clearly besotted with Vilmina. Noria has a letter to Vilmina on her person when Tav makes it to the Water Queen's house. She hasn't gotten the time or the courage to send it to Vilmina quite yet. Noria is guarding Alandra's bedroom, and Vilmina her office. I like to think that's how they met, gazing at each other across the walkway leading to the bedroom. Tav's main involvement with the Water Queen's house and Umberlee comes when Alandra asks them to investigate the death of savage sea wind Holli Dilford. Fishermen found her body tangled up in their nets after she was wounded by a submarine on its way to Gortash's Iron Throne. Her death has caused some unease among the other Umberlants of the temple. Floodtide Alandra maintains that Umberlee saved Holli from an ignoble death by drowning her once she was injured, ensuring that she didn't suffer a drawn-out death from blood loss. Darkbreaker O'Hara O'Hara doesn't see it that way. She wonders in the cave underneath the temple whether Holli could have been saved from her injuries. To speak out against Umberlee's mercy of drowning scares the other Darkbreakers, and O'Hara is quickly hushed by her fellow acolytes. The quest we recognise ends up with Tav finding Redhammer, who was driving the submersible that hit Holli, and either giving him up to Alandra or protecting him from her waveservants. Originally, it didn't go this way. The result was the same, but the route to get there was far more detailed. Inside of Flim's cargo warehouse, Tav finds a dead goblin and a number of wargs, and a book on taming wargs nearby to hint that this was a failed taming project gone wrong. Using unused flags from Baldur's Gate 3's data, I'm pretty sure that this goblin was named Mulgrew, stationed at the warehouse to prevent anyone other than Redhammer from going down into the cellar where the submersible waited. After killing him and his wargs, Tav could have found his journal, which I think noted down the submersible's comings and goings and documented it hitting Holli. You can pass it onto the Water Queen's house and show it to Alandra, so Mulgrew's journal must have had some relevance to the quest to avenge Holli. There was also an additional waveservant who was with Holli when she died. This waveservant was named Kalia and was injured by the submersible that killed Holli. Tav would have been sent to talk to the Grey Wavers by the fisherfolk who had pulled Holli out of the water. This is revealed in context added for the VA of the fisherfolk who found Holli. It reads, he reveals that when they found her, they saw a turbulence going towards the docks and that a Grey Waver was pointing and shouting at it. The Grey Wavers are a group of fisherfolk, as far as I can tell, and in the quest they would have seen the direction the submersible was going in after it killed Holli, towards the Flim's cargo warehouse. In this version, Redhammer didn't kill Holli by mistake. Instead, he killed her in self-defense, because she was trying to open the hatch to the submersible, perhaps? It's hard to imagine what other excuse he would have used unless Holli had tracked him back to Flim's cargo warehouse, and he had killed her and then dumped her in the water, but that's all my speculation. I'm unsure, but a flag makes it clear that Redhammer saw what he did as self-defense. Though a huge machine against a fleshy waveservant hardly seems like it would warrant any claim of self-defense to me. First hearing about Gortash's Iron Throne had me stumped. How would Umberlee, Wave Mother, allow a follower of Bane to create an underwater prison in her seas without them suffering some kind of punishment for not cutting her in on the deal? Now, Gortash did use Umberlee adjacent labour for the Iron Throne, but when I say Umberlee adjacent, I mean someone that Umberlee would not have messed with. After the Iron Throne's architect, Bluesky, complained about the difficulty of underwater labour, Gortash employed someone called Antiope. Antiope was a renegade Darkbreaker who had fallen into apostasy but still had the ability to charm and control Sahuagin. It's implied that Antiope made the Sahuagin construct the Iron Throne, although because she was a renegade Darkbreaker this wouldn't have been something that Umberlee would have been a part of, as she was a heretic against the Umberlee faith. Later, Antiope made the poor decision to threaten Gortash in an attempt to double her payment for her Sahuagin services. A note titled A Negotiation can be found on a skeleton in a cell in the basement of Flim's cargo, which contains the remnants of metal used in the construction of the Iron Throne. This is almost definitely Antiope, and her threats to Gortash have, as many of us could have predicted, gone punished. Bluesky is also dead by the time Tav enters the Iron Throne, likely killed by Gortash or his Sahuagin to keep the Iron Throne secret. Why did I say Gortash's Sahuagin? Gortash isn't an Umberlant. However, he is a negotiator, and would know the value of colluding with Umberlee lest his Iron Throne be destroyed with her wrath. Evidence supporting this collusion comes in the forms of some unused dialogue and region flags that indicate the Water Queen's house sold silver pearls to the Steel Watch Foundry. Elandra may have turned a blind eye to the Iron Throne should Gortash donate to the Bitch Queen via purchasing some exquisitely expensive silver pearls. That's my pet theory. This would also explain the Sahuagin patrolling the Iron Throne. As far as I know, Elandra is no Sahuagin tamer, but Sahuagin, as worshippers of Umberlee, may have been sent directly by her to serve the Iron Throne in exchange for a kickback from Gortash's considerable treasury. An opulent chest in the Iron Throne hides away the secret to this Sahuagin teamwork, a Sahuagin singing bundle necklace. It's described as having deep emerald stones which sparkle like Eldath's eyes. Eldath is a lake spirit and goddess of peace and calm waters, a pacifist who serves Sylvanus. But this is not what a singing bundle should look like. Singing bundles are strings of conches, bones and shells which, when shaken, sound like the clacking of the Sahuagin language. They're used by the Sahuagin to record the species' lore and history. You don't read books as a Sahuagin, you hear them. The necklace with its emerald stones can be chalked up to poor research on the part of Larian. The singing bundle, being in the Iron Throne, does indicate one other way that Gortash may have employed Sahuagin, through holding cultural relics hostage to be released only when Sahuagin had completed their part of the bargain. Kind of like a fantasy version of the British Museum. Or this singing bundle could have belonged to Antiope before Gortash had her killed. Bluesky may have stolen it from her in an attempt to communicate with the Sahuagin himself, but failed miserably, resulting at his death by their claws. There's also a secular goblet in the Iron Throne. Sekala is the shark god of the Sahuagin, who some of them worship, and this could also be a blackmail tool, Gortash holding the relic hostage in return for the Sahuagin's labour. One final aspect and mystery of Umberlee I have to mention remains. For a reason that escapes me, she rid the Grey Harbour of Baldur's Gate of fog. Catriano, a patron of the Elfsong Tavern, comments on the absence of fog. They say,
I liked the city better when it was gloomy, before Umberlee banished the fogs. Sunlight just makes my eyes water. Luckily, it's still gloomy in here.
Why did Umberlee banish the fog? Ridding the harbour of fog would make for safer sea passages. Less cargo and lives drifting to the bottom of Umberlee's ocean, more confident sea captains, which means less supplication to the Queen of the Sea. Dockworker Amphol wonders where the harbour fog went to, so its absence is noticeable for Grey Harbour regulars. A book titled Unpublished Portents by Katie Lowlockton may hold the key. Katie writes, as a blend of aeromancy, the art of divining the future from atmospheric conditions, and hydromancy, divination through water, fog divination represents an experimental and, as yet, inconclusive praxis. Take the cases of Grey Harbour and Baldur's Gate. Soothsayers took to crafting masks from the dense, milk-pale fog blanketing these places, the expressions on those masks indicating positive or negative outcomes in the lives of those who originally commissioned them. Now those banks of fog have retreated, presenting an intriguing omen all its own. Did Umberlee banish the fog because it was lending power via fog divination to those she didn't approve of? Maybe she's devising a way to make fog divination part of her divine portfolio. I have no idea. The machinations of a deity are far beyond my ken. And that is all about Umberlee and the Water Queen's house in Baldur's Gate 3. If you enjoyed this video, please do like it and subscribe to my little video game lore channel. I come out with a new video about video game lore every single week, and I also have a Patreon. For £5 a month or more, you get early ad-free access to my videos, as well as other behind-the-scenes content. And if you have any friends who like Baldur's Gate 3 or D&D, please do send this video to them as well if you want to support me for free. I appreciate every single last one of you. And now I am going to go and keep this makeup on for the rest of the day, honestly, as I really like it. Look, I had scales on my eyebrow, which you can't see for most of the video, which is a bummer, but fishnet tights and eyeshadow go a long way. So I will see you folks next time.